Alright, so today I want to compare the coral glow to the banana gene in ball pythons. And a lot of people think that the coral glow and the banana are pretty much the same gene. As a matter of fact, if you go over to morphmarket.com and search for coral glow, a lot of times you'll bring up a lot of snakes that are listed as a coral glow / banana, and they'll actually list both genes. But there are some people that think there are subtle differences between the coral glows and the bananas. As a matter of fact, I was actually selling some snakes at a reptile show a couple years ago, and kind of the interesting thing is they put me right next to another table, this guy selling ball pythons. It was pretty much, table to table, side by side, which they usually don't do to kind of eliminate the competition between two different ball python guys. And this guy I've known for quite a while. I actually bought some snakes from him. And kind of the hard part about being next to another ball python table is I'm always tempted to buy some ball pythons from the table right next to me. As a matter of fact, that's usually what happens. I end up going home with some of his snakes and he buys some of my snakes. But kind of the interesting thing at the last show when we were side by side at the show, he had some bananas in his display and I had some coral glows, and it seemed like my coral glows were a lot brighter, had more oranges and purples in them. But keep in mind, both the banana and the coral glows, they really transition as they age and mature. So you look at the older bananas and coral glows and they look pretty similar, but in that case it seemed like my coral glows were a little bit brighter, and that I think is what a lot of people kind of consider the differences between the bananas and the coral glows, although there can be a lot of variability within each gene, within the coral glows. I've seen some coral glows that are really bright and some that are kind of faded out a little bit. So today I want to jump over the internet and I want to go head to head comparing the coral glow with the banana ball python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on morphmarket.com and I want to start with this snake right here. This is what a coral glow looks like. And kind of the interesting thing between the coral glows and the bananas, they're pretty much the only two genes in all of ball pythons that are sex-linked genes. The gender of the offspring is associated with the breeding of the parents, which is kind of an interesting anomaly. Sometimes it'll actually drive you crazy. So for example, I actually have a male coral glow that is a male maker. And with the males, you can have male makers or female makers. And with the male makers, if you actually take that coral glow and breed it to something else, half the offspring come out as coral glows and all the coral glows will be males, which is kind of an interesting anomaly. As a matter of fact, a lot of people I've heard this over and over again, that they say half the offspring are coral glows and they'll be males, and all the non-coral glow offspring will be females. And I've heard that over and over, and I kind of find just the opposite, where my non-coral glow offspring are pretty much a 50-50 mix of males and females. As a matter of fact, if you actually go over to my Morphmarket store and look at my sold snakes and look at everything that's 50% het pied, all those actually came from my coral glow, and there's both males and females in there. And I probably produced, I'd say, maybe 5 or 6 clutches of coral glow. Half of them are coral glows, and every single coral glow that I produce is always a male. I haven't got one single female. It's kind of maddening, it would be pretty nice to actually have a female coral glow. And the females aren't associated with the male makers and female makers. So if you breed a female coral glow, half the offspring come out as males and females. Doesn't matter if they're coral glow or non-coral glow, which is kind of an interesting effect. And it really links the coral glows and the bananas. It's the only two genes where you'll see that linking of the males and the females. So this is what a coral glow looks like. You'll notice this is actually a coral glow hatchling, and they can really go through quite a dramatic transformation from hatchlings to adults. And usually as hatchlings, they have quite a bit of color, like the orange coming in on the sides, and then on the top you kind of have almost like a light lavender purple color on the top of the snake. If you actually compare the coral glow to the banana, take a look at this. This is pretty much exactly the same as the coral glow if you compare them side by side. And kind of the interesting thing is there's a lot of bananas that are a lot brighter and some that are pretty browned out, and it's pretty much the same with the bananas and the coral glows. And I'd say probably these two examples are probably the average brightness of what you could expect with the bananas and the coral glows. So take a look at this one. This is actually an older coral glow, one that has a little bit of age on it. And you definitely see it transitioned away from kind of the orange on the side and the lavender on the top into more of a two-tone yellow with a whole bunch of freckles. It's kind of interesting how you get all these freckles in it. As a matter of fact, actually, when I got my coral glow over on Morphmarket, I saw a picture as a hatchling. It was one of the brightest, most colorful hatchlings that I saw. And when they actually shipped me the snake, they shipped me a snake that almost looked like this. And I was like, hey, did you ship me the right snake? Because I didn't know anything about male makers or female makers or the transition from, you know, hatchling to an adult, and I didn't know anything at all about the coral glows. And let me tell you, it was kind of a crash course in genetics buying my first coral glow. So if you actually take a look at this and compare this coral glow to a banana, take a look at the banana. Almost transitions exactly the same, and the banana really gets pretty much the same spots on it. You can tell this one is a little bit lighter in color, and I think that's pretty much due to the age of the snake. If you actually take a look at this one's coming in at 2,700 grams, which is a really big female. As a matter of fact, if this was still for sale, I'd probably buy it. This one actually sold for $1,200, which is pretty amazing. As a matter of fact, when I started in ball pythons, these female bananas and the coral glows were selling for a crazy amount. They've really come down. It's pretty amazing. And if you actually take a look at the older coral glow, let's take a look at the weight on this one. This one is about 800 grams, so you can definitely tell this one's kind of a sub-adult, kind of still going through the transition where you see a little bit of the orange color coming through and maybe just a little bit of purple. They transition pretty fast. It's pretty amazing. So I'd say, you know, this coral glow probably will end up to look exactly like this banana as an adult. So as far as the visual appearance, I'd say, you know, the coral glows and the bananas on average are pretty much exactly the same. So what I like to do kind of from here is to test the coral glows and the bananas mixed in with other genes to see if we can actually get the same effect from one to the other, so we can kind of compare them side by side. Sometimes different genes almost look exactly the same side by side, and then you mix other genes into the mix and they react a little bit different. Then you can tell little subtleties between different versions of the same gene. So in this case, I'm actually mixing in Enchi into the coral glow. This is one of my favorite genes, mixing in with either coral glow or banana. And essentially what the Enchi does is it really reduces the pattern into almost these tiger stripes, really reduces it. And probably my favorite part of the Enchi is it actually eliminates the freckles as it ages and matures, and it really keeps a really well-defined snake that's really clean as it ages. It's pretty amazing. I've actually seen some pretty fantastic Enchi combinations with the coral glow and banana. As a matter of fact, I just bought a banana Enchi clown, and that thing looks crazy. It's pretty amazing. So this is what the coral glow Enchi looks like, and here is the banana version. Take a look at this. Pretty amazing combinations. Both of them are really, it's pretty breathtaking combinations. Really sharp contrast, and I'd say pretty much they're acting exactly the same with the banana and the coral glow when you mix in the Enchi. So take a look at this. This is kind of interesting too. This is the super coral glow. So you have two copies of the coral glow. So essentially what you do is you take a male and a female. And sometimes it's hard to find the female coral glows, and then you breed it to a male, and 25% of the time you end up with a super with two copies of the gene. And when you make the super, essentially what you get is you get kind of a faded out coral glow. It doesn't really have a lot of times it doesn't really have the oranges and the lavenders that you'll see with just one copy of the gene. And a lot of times, as a matter of fact, if you actually compare them side by side, the super with just one copy, a lot of times it really doesn't have the contrast of just one copy of the gene. But keep in mind, if you take a super coral glow and you breed it to something else, all the offspring come out as coral glow, which is pretty awesome. And another kind of an interesting anomaly with the supers, with the coral glow and the banana, is they don't have spots either. It completely eliminates the freckles as they age and mature, which is kind of interesting. So here is the super coral glow. We can compare that to the super banana, and if you actually compare them side by side, I looked at a whole bunch of different versions of super bananas and super coral glows, and these are probably the closest ones I can find. Some of them are really faded out, and some of them have a lot of, you know, more contrast. I'd say these are the ones with a little bit more contrast I've seen. Most of them are kind of faded out a little bit more. I'd say as far as the visual appearance of the supers, I'd say they're pretty much exactly the same. So take a look at this. This is a coral glow with the pied, and sometimes when you mix certain genes with the pied, sometimes you can get a high white pied and sometimes you can get a low white pied. So for example, if you mix Enchi with the pied, you almost always get a really low white pied with just a little bit of white on the pied. And then if you actually take Russo and mix it in with the pied, you almost always get a really high white pied. It's kind of interesting. So I kind of wanted to compare the coral glows and the bananas mixed in with pied to see if we get high whites or low whites. Come to find out, if you actually mix the coral glow with the pied, sometimes you get a really low white, and take a look at this, sometimes you get a really high white coral glow. Take a look at this beauty. I'd say this is probably one of my favorite pies with the coral glow. And kind of the interesting thing is when they're hatchlings, they look absolutely breathtaking, and then as they age and mature, they lose pretty much all the oranges and purples, and they get a little bit of freckles, and it kind of browns out a little bit. Not really as impressive as adults, but let me tell you, these coral glow pies, they are absolutely stunning as hatchlings. And if you actually compare that to the banana version of this combination, you get a kind of a low white pied with just a little bit, and almost looks exactly like the coral glow. And there's a whole bunch of different examples of the high white pieds and then the low white pieds. And I'd say pretty much based on the banana versus the coral glow, you get pretty much a mix of high white pieds and low white pieds, and they all pretty much have the same contrast and definition, pretty much exactly the same with the pied. So here's another one that I kind of wanted to test the dark side, going kind of the dark side of the combination. So I wanted to pick out the darkest gene in all the ball pythons, which I'm pretty sure is the blackhead. If you mix blackhead with just about anything, it really darkens the background of the snake. And kind of the tricky part with the coral glows and the bananas is they're both really visually dominant. So when you mix it in with other combinations, a lot of times it'll completely overwhelm the visual dominance, where sometimes you can't even see the genes in there. As a matter of fact, I actually produced some coral glows with pastel in the mix, and for the life of me, I could not pick out the pastel in the combination. It's really visually dominant. But the blackhead, when you mix it in, it pretty much dominates everything with the blackhead. You could definitely see quite an influence darkening the background with the blackhead. So this is the coral glow version, and here is the banana version, and this is the banana blackhead, and these blackhead combinations can be pretty expensive too. This is, as a matter of fact, this is a pretty good price here, $4.50 for a blackhead banana. Pretty awesome. If you actually look at the differences between them, I'd say, you know, there's a whole bunch of variations of the blackhead bananas, and I couldn't really find that much of a difference where I could tell, you know, one versus the other, that they were really different. I'd say pretty much the banana and the coral glow mixed in with the blackhead are pretty much exactly the same. All right, so this is kind of another thing I wanted to show you. So pretty much all the way up to here, we've pretty much proven that the banana and the coral glow are pretty much exactly the same gene. But if you actually come over here to morphmarket.com, there are some differences between the coral glow and the bananas. And if you actually take a look at this, this is coral glows, all the coral glows that have been posted over here on Morphmarket, all the ones for sale and all the ones that have sold. So you actually have a total of 2,379 coral glows, quite a few coral glows. But if you actually compare that number to the bananas, take a look at this. The number of bananas over here is 13,386, and that is just the bananas and the coral glows in the United States. I didn't even look at, you know, like the European, the website, and the South African website, which is kind of crazy. So kind of the interesting thing is, I think they're pretty much exactly the same gene, but it seems like a lot of people prefer the banana name over the coral glow name. For whatever reason, it just seems like a more popular name. People want to buy a banana instead of a coral glow, which it's a little bit, I think, you know, naming it after some tropical fruit is maybe a little bit more, you know, appealing to the buyer, which is kind of interesting. As a matter of fact, I was actually looking for some really high-end clown combos, and there's a lot of stuff that has been done with the banana, and it doesn't seem like there's been a lot of stuff done with the coral glow. So I'd say, in conclusion, yes, I think the banana and the coral glow are exactly the same gene. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Mark Janshorik asks, What do you do to control the humidity in your reptile room? That is a very good question. So here in Colorado, we actually have a really low ambient humidity, usually less than 15%. It's super dry here. And when I first started in ball pythons, I actually started with an all-room humidifier connected to a humidity controller, and I dialed it in to 60% humidity, which is pretty much perfect for ball pythons, about 60%. And the problem is at 60%, let me tell you, that thing was drinking an incredible amount of water. I was filling that thing I was probably going through about 3 or 4 gallons of water every single day, which is pretty crazy. And the other problem is I was actually using well water up here in the mountains of Colorado. We're on a well system, and our well water has a lot of minerals in it. So when that well water evaporates, it pretty much clogs up the humidifier with all the minerals left behind from all the water. And let me tell you, it was pretty much a nightmare, and I pretty much got rid of that humidifier after, I'd say, maybe a month or two, and I pretty much scrapped that idea, and I pretty much switched over to trying to control the humidity in each individual enclosure instead of trying to control the humidity in the whole reptile room. So essentially what I do is I take a little watering can and I go through every single tub, probably every other day, and I just kind of hit it real quick with a little bit of water. Make sure there's enough water in that coconut husk substrate so it doesn't completely dry out. And that's been working fantastic. As a matter of fact, I've actually seen quite a few reptile breeding facilities where they'll have different kind of setups to control the humidity. I've seen one where they have like an overhead misting system where it'll kind of mist every now and then, almost like kind of like the vegetable section in your grocery store. I don't know if they have like the little thunder thing or whatever, but I've seen them. It's kind of an interesting setup. I saw one that was a pretty big facility where they're breeding ball pythons, and what they did is they heated the floor, and then when they came in to work on the ball pythons, what they would do is they'd spray water on the floor, and then the heated floor would pretty much humidify pretty much the whole facility, which was pretty amazing, kind of a clever idea. And I just thought it would be kind of neat to have like a waterfall feature in the background in my reptile room, which would be kind of cool to add humidity. And I've actually kind of been thinking about it. If I was to expand into like a bigger facility, probably the ideal thing that you could hook up that would be totally automatic is if you actually set up a really big reverse osmosis system to remove all the minerals from the water and then run that into some kind of a humidifier system, like either a humidifier or some kind of an overhead spray or maybe some waterfalls all over on the sides, you know, in your facility. I think that would be the ideal setup. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.